If you were to meet with me in our conference room, whether to discuss trial strategy or to learn about the tools and alternatives open to you for trusts and estate planning, you would see the painting, The Death of Socrates. This painting is here because of many of the principles discussed in detail within Plato's The Apology and in his dialogue, Crito. The Apology is Socrates' defense when he is on trial for his life before the democratic assembly at Athens. Socrates' words are important to us, and one reason for this is that many people don't want to think about estate planning for the same reasons that people don't want to think about death. But your legal and estate planning is not primarily about your death. It's about making decisions during your lifetime that will communicate what you most care about to those friends and family who are closest to you. These are the same category of decisions that Socrates had to reason through for the sake of those he loved in 399 BC. Right before the Athenian assembly is about to vote on the verdict, Socrates says the following: "Yet a word more. Perhaps there may be someone who is offended at me when he calls to mind how he himself, on a similar or even less serious occasion, had recourse to prayers and supplications with many tears, and how he produced his children in court, which was a moving spectacle, together with a posse of his relations and friends. Whereas I, who am probably in danger of my life, will do none of these things. Perhaps this may come into his mind, and he may be set against me and vote in anger because he is displeased at this. Now if there be such a person among you, which I am far from affirming, I may fairly reply to him, My friend, I am a man, and like other men, a creature of flesh and blood, not of wood or stone, as Homer says. And I have a family, yes, and sons, O Athenians, 3 in number, one of whom is growing up, and the other 2 are still young. And yet I will not bring any of them hither in order to petition you for an acquittal. And why not? Not from any self-will or disregard of you. Whether I am or am not afraid of death is another question, of which I will not now speak. But my reason simply is that I feel such conduct to be discreditable to myself and you and the whole state. One who has reached my years, and one who has a name for wisdom, whether deserved or not, ought not to debase himself. At any rate, the world has decided that Socrates is in some way superior to other men. And if those among you who are said to be superior in wisdom and courage and any other virtue demean themselves in this way, how shameful is their conduct. I have seen men of reputation, when they have been condemned, behaving in the strangest manner. They seemed to fancy that they were going to suffer something dreadful if they died, and that they could be immortal if you only allowed them to live. And I think that they were a dishonor to the state. And I say that these things ought not to be done by those of us who are of reputation. And if they are done, you ought not to permit them. You ought rather to show that you are more inclined to condemn not the man who is quiet, but the man who gets up a doleful scene and makes the city ridiculous. But, setting aside the question of dishonor, there seems to be something wrong in petitioning a judge and thus procuring an acquittal instead of informing and convincing him. For his duty is not to make a present of justice, but to give judgment. He has sworn that he will judge according to the laws, and not according to his own good pleasure. And neither he nor we should get into the habit of perjuring ourselves. There can be no piety in that. Do not then require me to do what I consider dishonorable and impious and wrong, especially now when I am being tried for impiety on the indictment of Meletus. For if, O men of Athens, by force of persuasion and entreaty I could overpower your oaths, then I should be teaching you to believe that there are no gods, and convict myself in my own defense of not believing in them. But that is not the case, for I do believe that there are gods, and in a far higher sense than that in which any of my accusers believe in them. And to you and to God I commit my cause, to be determined by you as is best for you and me. After that speech, Socrates receives a guilty verdict. His accuser then asks for the death penalty, and Socrates replies, "There are many reasons why I am not grieved, O men of Athens, at the vote of condemnation. I expected it, and am only surprised that the votes are so nearly equal, for I had thought that the majority against me would have been far larger." And so, he proposes death as the penalty. And what shall I propose on my part, O men of Athens? Clearly that which is my due. And what is that which I ought to pay or to receive? If there were a law at Athens, such as there is in other cities, that a capital cause should not be decided in one day, then I believe I should have convinced you. But now the time is too short. I cannot in a moment refute great slanders, and as I am convinced that I never wronged another, I will assuredly not wrong myself. I will not say of myself that I deserve any evil or propose any penalty. Why should I? Because I am afraid of the penalty of death which Meletus proposes? And if I say exile, this may possibly be the penalty which you will fix, I must indeed be blinded by the love of life if I were to consider that when you, who are my own citizens, cannot endure my discourses and words, and have found them so grievous and odious that you would fain have done with them, others are likely to endure me. No, indeed, men of Athens, that is not very likely. And what a life should I lead at my age, wandering from city to city, living in ever-changing exile and always being driven out? For I am quite sure that into whatever place I go, as here so also there, the young men will come to me. And if I drive them away, their elders will drive me out at their desire. And if I let them come, their fathers and friends will drive me out for their sakes. Someone will say, "Yes, Socrates, but cannot you hold your tongue? And then you may go into a foreign city, and no one will interfere with you." Now, I have great difficulty in making you understand my answer to this. If I tell you that this would be a disobedience to a divine command, and therefore that I cannot hold my tongue, you will not believe that I am serious. And if I say again that the greatest good of man is daily to converse about virtue, and all that concerning which you hear me examining myself and others, and that the life which is unexamined is not worth living, that you are still less likely to believe. And yet, what I say is true, although a thing of which it is hard for me to persuade you. After receiving the death sentence, Socrates makes a last request, saying, "I am not angry with my accusers or my condemners. They have done me no harm, although neither of them meant to do me any good, and for this I may gently blame them. Still, I have a favor to ask of them. When my sons are grown up, I would ask you, O my friends, to punish them, and I would have you trouble them as I have troubled you, if they seem to care about riches or anything more than about virtue, or if they pretend to be something when they are really nothing. Then reprove them as I have reproved you, for not caring about that for which they ought to care, and thinking that they are really something when they are really nothing. And if you do this, I and my sons will have received justice at your hands." Finally, the Credo dialogue takes place in the prison cell of Socrates as he is awaiting his execution. He is visited by his longtime friend, Crito, who explains that he has bribed the prison guard and arranged for Socrates to escape with his life. When Socrates refuses, Crito makes a series of arguments to persuade Socrates to escape. Among these arguments, Crito says that, by not escaping, Socrates will be reflecting poorly on his friends by making people think his friends were not willing to rescue him, that Socrates will be cooperating with injustice, and that Socrates will be harming his own family by leaving his children without a father. Now this is important, because the painting The Death of Socrates and the Crito dialogue are often misunderstood by many people who think Socrates is committing suicide. That isn't an accurate understanding of this story. Socrates is facing an executioner in the circumstance where he fought and argued against his conviction and death sentence, utilizing the legal procedure afforded him by the laws of Athens. To think that he is willingly drinking the hemlock is to mistake a sentenced person walking to the executioner's block instead of being carried there as a willingness. In response to Crito, early in the dialogue, Socrates refers to intentionally avoiding actions that will corrupt and harm that part of us which becomes better with justice and is destroyed by injustice. And he continues to explain that in pursuing justice, his concern is not whether the actions of the corrupt or unjust Athenian assembly are just or unjust, but whether his own actions, particularly in the face of death, are just or unjust. The question, then, is whether Socrates, escaping with his life from the sentence he received under the laws of Athens, would be following or forsaking his principles and trying to live the life of a just man. But if this is true, what is the application? Socrates asks. Then he answers. Consider the matter in this way. Imagine that I am about to play truant, and the laws and the government come and interrogate me. Tell us, Socrates, they say, what are you about? Are you not going, by an act of yours, to overturn us, the laws, and the whole state as far as in you lies? Do you imagine that a state can subsist and not be overthrown, in which the decisions of law have no power, but are set aside and trampled upon by individuals? What will be our answer, Crito, to these and the like words? To summarize this question, would it be just for mere private individuals to be the ones ultimately to decide when they will and when they will not follow the law? The laws, Socrates explains, could then rightly respond to him, saying, you are not on equal terms with us, nor can you think that you have a right to do to us what we are doing to you. Would you have any right to strike or revile or to do any evil to your father because you have been struck or reviled by him or received some other evil at his hands? Then the laws will say, consider, Socrates, if we are speaking truly that in your present attempt you are going to do us an injury. Moreover, you might, in the course of the trial, if you had liked, have fixed the penalty at banishment. The state, which refuses to let you go now, would have let you go then. But you pretended that you preferred death to exile, and that you were not unwilling to die. And now you have forgotten these fine sentiments and pay no respect to us, the laws of whom you are the destroyer. Say that you wish to live for the sake of your children. You want to bring them up and educate them. Will you take them into Thessaly and deprive them of Athenian citizenship? Is this the benefit which you will confer upon them? Or are you under the impression that they will be better cared for and educated here if you are still alive, although absent from them, for your friends will take care of them? Do you fancy that if you are an inhabitant of Thessaly, they will take care of them? And if you are an inhabitant of the other world, that they will not take care of them? Nay, but if they who call themselves friends are good for anything, They will. To be sure they will. Listen then, Socrates, to us who have brought you up. Think not of life and children first and of justice afterwards, but of justice first. For neither will you nor any that belong to you be happier or holier or juster in this life, or happier in another, if you do as Crito bids. If you have children, or even if they are simply young nephews, nieces, or other young people that you care about and love, when you create your trust, you will decide who is going to act as successor trustee and who is going to act as guardian if your children are still minors at the time that you die. You have the opportunity now to communicate values such as pursuing justice and virtue over self-interest and safety in the way that you design your estate plan and trust. In this painting, The Death of Socrates, you are looking at a man who has designated his trustees to care for his children, and who has chosen to live and to die in such a way that his deepest values and hard-won wisdom may be passed down to younger generations, particularly with an urgent plea that being just, no matter any other circumstances, is always to be preferred to being unjust. There is no better picture of what estate planning can mean than that. Due credit for the inspiration behind this video should be attributed here to Professor Irving Younger.